This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. It's episode 767, and this week we welcome Luis Suarez of RestorRight Bilingual Academy from Edinburgh, Texas. We're going to talk about understanding Latino culture to develop a workforce and better service client needs. Luis is an impressive young man and an up-and-coming star in the restoration world. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. They're the reason we can continue doing the show. Don't forget, after the show, we have continue the conversation on afterthoughts.iaqradio.com. IAQ Radio's marquee sponsor is the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. IAQ Radio Association sponsors are the Restoration Industry Association, RIA, at restorationindustry.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA, at eia-usa.org. IAQ Radio industry sponsors are Particles Plus at particlesplus.com. Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com. EMSL Analytical Inc. at emsl.com.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick@cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry to report that no one identified the late journalist Charles Krauthammer, who wrote an opinion piece in the Washington Post in favor of the use of the F word after Vice President dropped an F-bomb in a verbal exchange with Senator Patrick Leahy on the Senate floor. This week's trivia question comes out. How many Spanish-speaking countries recognize Spanish as an official language? Back to you, Joe.
All right. Luis Suarez is a seasoned technical educator and consultant with over a decade of experience in the restoration industry. His journey in the field is marked by a passion for education and a strong commitment to helping others succeed. As the founder and leader of RestorRight Bilingual Academy, Luis has created a dynamic platform aimed at advancing knowledge and skills within the restoration community. Welcome to the show, Luis. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for you guys having me here.
Oh, always a pleasure. We talked a little bit before the show, and I communicated with you a little bit. Your school's down in what is it, Edinburgh, Texas? That's about as far south as you can get, pretty close to Padre Island and the Gulf Coast. Are you from that area originally, and how did you get started in the water damage world?
So I was originally born and raised in Laredo, Texas, which is about 3 hours, a little bit more north. Okay. Now my office resides in Edinburgh, Texas, because it's a metropolitan area. So we are close to South Padre Island, like about an hour away. It's as far south as you can get in Texas. So I actually started in 2013. I was pursuing a career as a personal bodyguard in the security company, but eventually there were some issues with that company. I didn't like the way they handled the stuff, the culture and stuff. So they had asked me, you have to go through a martial arts training in order for you to qualify, so on and so forth. In that martial arts training, the Throne Academy, that's when I met the supervisor, the very first one for Serpro North Laredo. And honestly, I thought that when he told me he works here, and if I wanted an opportunity there, I thought he meant surfing, like surfing in the on waves. And I was like, I wonder where we do this, because unless it's the river. I'm like, this is new. I said yes. I was like, sure enough. And the rest is history. That's when I started my career in the restoration industry.
That's interesting. So you were looking at doing like security work? Do you have a background in that area? Or?
I started with a company for like security work, but they had the division of personal bodyguard. And it was something that interested me because I always had this like mindset of helping others. And it was like the closest thing, I guess, for me at that moment.
Huh.
So I did the modular course, but because of that, I ended up in the restoration industry.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit about your journey through the ranks. You started out, we just learned from, right from the bottom, I guess, as a field technician. And then I assume you worked your way up through the ranks over the years to the point where now you've got RestorRight Bilingual Academy.
Yeah, so I started at a young age. I started when I was 20. And it was I started with the purpose of serving someone, and I wanted to be in the field of working either like in the doctor or paramedic and such. So when I got introduced with ServPro and the thank yous and all the good wishes that you get from the people that we help, that drew me in. So I started like a helper technician, but then eventually started getting more. Um, I started asking more tasks. I started saying, "Hey, how do you do this? Like the estimating part, handling the conversations with insurers, the customer complaints were the the fun ones, um, and so on and so
That,
forth." So eventually,
that might
uh,
be the first time I've heard someone say the customer complaints were the fun ones. I love that.
yeah, eventually, I started going through the ranks. I ended up being the operations managers with them, handling pretty much everything. Um, from the government contracts to the city stuff and training the people. So I ended up being finding this little small niche of like, oh, I can help in this portion. But I ended up asking them long ago, years ago, hey, how come there's no Spanish training? So they said, well, it's because there's no really market for it. I was like, we live on the border. It's nothing but Spanish. Everything's in English, though. So on and so forth. I ended up just saying, you know what? Let me learn a little bit more along the way. And eventually, what would happen? After almost 10 years of being with them as a career, we moved cities. So I moved out. I ended up being a consultant for another company. I helped them establish certain things with them and their teams, but I still had this in my head of like I want to teach. So I was presented an opportunity with Mr. David Oakes with Restoration Science Academy of potentially being an IICRC instructor. I went through the process. Nobody told me how long the process takes, but eventually there's like a little halt because there were pictures that I needed that I didn't have because everything was on the other program. And since I run everything, no one knew what where to look for, what the customer and all that stuff. So there's a little halt behind that. So I said, you know what? I still want to pursue it. Let me see how I can do it. Eventually, that's how I started saying, you know what? Let me just build my own academy so I can be helping out people based on my experiences, my purpose, and a little bit of stubbornness.
Luis, what other, I guess that David Oakes greatly inspired you. Any other instructors also inspire you, or was it David
Yes.
that triggered it?
The person who triggered my turning point was actually Mr. Doug Heiferman. He
Okay.
was the one who ended up being that turning point because the classes that were funded by the company were usually the essential ones, which are the WRT, the fire and smoke one, and the last one was the carpet cleaning. That was the one that turned my point in 2017. It completely drifted me like of wanting to learn more because of him, the way he expressed and the way he made me believe, hey, I can grow more than what I currently am. And essentially that's what I did. I just started self-funding more and more of education. That's why you see a long list of of stuff.
On your CV, I noticed that you got asbestos and there's probably 35 different training classes that you've taken over the years, and you say a lot of them you funded yourself.
Correct. I ended up funding myself my courses because the company would, I think everybody goes through this, that we want to show them the essentials just to do the work. But if there's no funds or the money is tight, there's no room for education. Eventually, I ended up going through some embarrassing moments through my career with the the customers and some adjusters. So because of those moments, I say, you know what, no, I want to make sure that the next time this happens, I know exactly what to say or to do before it actually occurs. So part of that, it required sacrifice, to be quite honest.
Did the companies give you grief about taking time off work in order to attend courses or not?
Honestly, no. They were I'm thankful for them, to be quite honest, because they say, you know what, we see that you're stubborn and we see that you love this, and they saw the opportunity for like
Yeah.
adapting something new to the processes.
Thanks.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, and I just think it's such an important point. A lot of people see customer complaints as something to run away from. And you kind of dove right in. It sounded like you almost enjoyed working with the people who were complaining. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so for me, the reason why I decided to say, hey, let me handle this was because I wanted to know where we messed up. And I wanted to make sure that if there was a complaint, I wanted to learn from that mistake to not repeat it again. So one of the things that I used to tell my employees, customer complaints are great because it helps us become better. If they don't tell us a feedback, God knows if we're doing the thing correct or not.
All right, let's
Well, wait.
go ahead.
I just have one more. Gee, did the company give you the authority to resolve the complaint? You know, like if it was a refund or if it was a redo or whatever. I mean, did they back you up? I mean,
Yeah, so at first it was like me being in the middle of basically for those authorizations that pretty much was going to cost money. It was the owner, and he was kind of telling me like, this is what I see, and this is where maybe we're going to have to like negotiate a resolution that may not impact us too much financially. And then eventually, once he started seeing that, like, don't do that, let's do this, that's when he got comfortable and said, you know what, handle
gotcha.
it. I'll
Okay,
trust
good.
what you do.
Gotcha. Thanks.
And I'm assuming a lot of these customers were Latino customers as well, and you probably dealt really well with that. What about the owner of the Surf Pro? Is he Latino?
Yes, he doesn't look Latino, but he is Latino.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that term just generally. What's the difference between Latino versus Hispanic? I mean, am I insulting somebody by saying Hispanic versus Latino, or is that it kind of interchangeable?
I don't think insulting. I don't think so. But for me, Latino is more of a like an identity and community, and Hispanic is more of like centralized. It's more like if you're Mexican, it's not broad because you have Latinos from say Portuguese, Brazil,
Puerto Rico.
Peru, and all that stuff. So they have a different. They're not, I guess, considered Hispanics. And I know Pete mentioned this, and I can't remember the correct way. But for me, like I said, it's more like a Latino is something that you identify as a culture, not really linguistic. And it's something that we share as a experience because of our roots and what we value.
Okay. And you've assessed a lot of training over the years. What's the biggest, you've been in classes, probably bilingual at some point, but What's the biggest misconception people have about providing Latino education?
So one of the biggest misconceptions that I know is saying we can translate this into Spanish and that's it. It ain't that simple as it is. When I started, I thought the same thing. If I can use AI to translate into English into Spanish, it will be fine. But then I realized that a lot of those students that I have come from different backgrounds of Spanish. So we really need to understand the culture behind, and that's been something that was like what's that commercial that you should have had a V8? When I went through it, I was like, oh damn, like there's a different cultural and food was one of them, the biggest one. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I've seen, thinking it's just about translating the issue and solving the problem. The other thing is most of us are more visual learners. And since we have more technology, not only photos, but videos is a form of learning quickly, super quickly what we're trying to teach them. And something that matches the scenario day to day. That's another thing that most of the classes is more theory, but it doesn't really, I guess, solve the issues that most of the restorers have day to day in the field itself.
How do
So
you oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
sorry, I was gonna say it's not really about teaching them less, it's more about teaching them a way that connects to them.
I did some work. This is, I don't know, over 20 years ago now, with a guy from Puerto Rico, Carlos Gonzalez Boothby. Wonderful guy. He had an HVAC cleaning company, and we were doing some training together. And he translated our manuals into Spanish. But then when I went to another place and used the same manuals with another instructor, there were some differences between his Puerto Rican Spanish and like a Mexican Spanish, etc. Do you run into that problem, and how do you deal with it?
Yes. So I initially did ran through that problem. So I said, you know what, let me decide to make it more neutral. Eventually, this is what happens. When I'm teaching them, I have to actually, one, I ask them like where they're from, right? So that I can have an idea if it's someone new. But I end up allowing them to use their own terminology. That's one of the things that I like. They come up with their own terminology, but it sticks to the same objective or the same point of it. And I think that may not stop at all, because everybody has his own language to refer to a bottle of water. Let's just say an example. So one of the things that I do, I try to make it as neutral as possible. And one of the things that people can use is AI. AI will be the problem solver for that, to keep it neutral. Otherwise, you may have a diverse teammate from different places that they come, and they may not understand. Like one person might understand what they're trying to say, the other person might be very confused.
Hey, Chuck,
Go ahead, Cliff.
now before you go on, many years ago, this had to be about 25 years ago, something like that. I was on the IICRC board of directors, and one of the other directors was a fellow by the name of Jim Darling. Jim Darling had ChemSpec Canada. He used to make all the ChemSpec products in Canada. And the subject came up about, teaching in foreign languages and so on and so forth. And, we had all the scientific terminology, and, we were talking about the different species of mold. There's, Stachybotrys and penicillium and so on and so forth. And we're just kind of going around and around. And I remember he said to me at a cigarette break, because we both were smoking back then, and we went out, and he said, I think that mold training is really four words: mold bad, clean good. And, it just made so much more sense than what I think we were trying to, to teach these people, because I think in many situations it can be very, very, easily simplified, so.
And it seems like that's what Luis was just
Oh,
saying.
yeah, no,
It's kind of
absolutely. Right.
very similar concept.
Right.
What other recommendations do you have for people that are trying to either work with maybe a customer or a building manager or maintenance people that, there's a how else do we do a better job of working with people who may or may not have English as a first language?
So when you're working with Latino people, one of the things that sometimes gets missed is the mutual respect. And what I mean is, making eye contact, saying hello, kind of like listening. Because sometimes when those customers, they're going through something, right? No matter which branch of a client he might be, they they think that you're maybe trying to rip them off, because they come from a background like, I can do it this way and it's much simpler and easier and cheaper. So they think that. So when you come and say, hey, hello, a handshake, eye contact, and you try your best to find a way to communicate or bring someone in that speaks the language, they end up having this respect to you and more of a loyalty as well. So that's where I see that a lot of companies that have just runs purely on English speakers kind of lack a bit, because they'll explain the process probably, or sometimes they're speeding, and that's when all the issues come up at the end of I don't know, not everything got removed based on what they thought it was needed, not the price was too big, whatever might be the issue. So at the very end, they think this person is either ripping me off, doesn't know what they're doing, doesn't take care of me as a client. Because I do see this, and I run through this with different people that are Hispanics. Like, they don't pay attention to me. They feel a little bit disrespected and alienated. I think that's how the correct term.
I wonder if maybe sometimes people think, and it's not just Latinos, but others, that we overkill things. Do you run into that?
A lot. We make it too complex, too complicated within our processes. So that's something that I try to tell the students that I teach, my clients. Don't make it too complex. Make it simple. Hey, you're here to extract water, monitor some stuff, maybe rip off some of the materials that's needed. Maybe you have to wait because we don't know if there's available funds or not, etc. So make it simple. All the technical stuff, all the documentation, that leave it for the reviewers. But for your clients, make it as simple as possible.
I think a lot of it is often, when the courses are being put together, I think a lot of that is instructor driven. I think a lot of instructors have this superiority complex rather than an inferiority complex. And I think, they walk in, I'm smarter than all these people. I want to impress them with all these big words and so on and so forth. And I believe that there is way, way too much complication. And a lot of these courses, could be simplified. And I think that they would be a lot more effective, personally.
I for sure see it not only for English speakers, but also on the Spanish side, because there's also that movement that
Right.
people don't realize. And I wrote an article behind that. But it is an issue that we sometimes get as an ego, because we get all the praises and all the good things that our students gives us, that we kind of become a bit arrogant. We don't realize it. So I was just thankful enough that I was mentioned this before I even started this.
Understood.
To make sure.
Right.
Oh yeah, the best excuse me, the best instructor I ever had as a part of my team was Danny Hunt, and it was because he approached everything from the most basic level, and and he worked with people, and he was, like you said, he would shake their hand, he would look them in the eyes, and he truly cared about those people and what they were learning in that class. And he went around and he made sure he talked to each individual instead of just letting someone sit in the back and, kind of slink in the back and not really participate in the class. He would go up to them. He would actually physically walk up to them, put his hand on their shoulder, and tell them, we want to hear what you have to say as well. So talk to us. And it just made his students love him. I don't know, are there any other tips you can give us for working with Latino students in our classes?
I think that this tip would be for both. One, for sure, in the Latino side, making sure we understand their culture, and it's really hard for me to say it like in a like right now because there's multiple cultures, but making sure that you understand the culture of your team, what they value, and the other thing as a whole, making sure that you allow them to share their mistakes, because that's one thing I've seen that no one does. Well, so far from my journey, right? That when I do my teachings, I basically share them my mess ups, my downfalls, what I did. That allows them to kind of feel comfortable saying like, oh, I'm not gonna get judged here because you messed up first. I went through this, or I'm going through this. What would be the scenarios? And usually that's when I start doing like, oh, okay, that's a good point. What if we do this? What have we learned? Based on what I've mentioned so far, what have we learned? Or, this is where we're going to talk about the next subject. But that's where I see that it's needed, allowing still on course with the objectives, right? Because we need to make sure that the course objectives get shown, but allowing the students to feel confident and comfortable that when they have a question, they're not going to be shut down or they're going to be made felt like oh, I don't want to be the dumb one here.
Right. And that's what Danny would do. He would tell stories about things and mistakes that he made, and then they would feel less like he was up on a pedestal and he was just another guy that had been out in the field and he's made the same mistakes they made. And, it really, really helped. Like I say, I never had anybody with higher ratings. After, we did course evaluations after every class, and it was just amazing. And he never followed he never used the slides. He never followed the outline. He just, he did it his own way. And then, I just let it go because, hey, if you're getting all straight 5 out of 5, I'm not going to tell you to change it. So, all right, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right, let's go to halftime, Grayson, and we'll come back with the second half of our interview. We've got Luis Suarez. We're talking a little bit about understanding Latino culture to develop a workforce and better service client needs. IAQ Radio's marquee sponsor is the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. Association sponsors are the Environmental Information Association. EIA's multidisciplinary membership collects, generates, and disseminates information concerning environmental and occupational health hazards in the built environment at eia-usa.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, iicrc.org. The Restoration Industry Association, the oldest and largest nonprofit professional trade association dedicated to providing leadership and promoting best practices through advocacy, standards, and professional qualifications for the restoration industry at restorationindustry.org. Industry sponsors are Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us, particlesplus.com. Tramex Meters, innovation in moisture detection and humidity monitoring systems since 1974 at tramexmeters.com. EMSL Analytical Inc., providing high-quality full-service laboratory services since 1981. EMSL.com. All right, let's get back with Luis. Luis, I came upon, I was looking through your CV, and I noticed that you are the 2025 RIA Volunteer of the Year, and that's a prestigious award. Tell us a little bit about how your work with RIA has affected your career and how associations in general have affected your career.
Thank you. So it it deeply affected me in a sense of that it matters. Like most of us, I think, go through the same thing, that we put our effort, we always put 110 or more percent to our work and our passion, and it feels like it's not seen or at least valued in some way, some way or some form. So when I got it, I honestly did not know. They sent me an email and it said voy. Voy in Spanish means going. But I didn't realize it meant volunteer of the year. So when Nicole told me, hey, please come over here, you're gonna be sitting down in the front of the row, and I was like, okay. And I was watching, the what they're gonna do, and I was like, okay, cool. I was thinking this because not many know this part. Before joining SurfPro, when I was in high school still, I was like 3 months from graduating. I got hit by a drunk driver. I broke a lot of stuff. Short-term memory loss. I went through a lot of things that accident occurred, and I missed my chance to be on stage to receive my diploma, my high school diploma.
Oh.
So I never experienced it. So when they called me up there, I was like, what do I do? Where do I go? And it was this joy, this feeling. So this is what it feels like. So for me, it changed my perspective, my mood of like, you know what, I'm going forward. I'm not gonna stop whatever happens to help out the community, both in English and Spanish speakers. And this allowed me actually, to be honest, to like behind the scenes, to be seeing what's going on. What's going on, what the challenges are, and my input behind it. So when I started with the RIA back in 2013, in October, I believe, I was scared, to be quite honest, because I was like, you guys are like doctors and I'm the patient and I have no clue what the languages are. And that's when I said, you know what, let me continue learning more. Let me see what other trainings exist. So I started understanding what the issues were, what the point was. And then I went through an issue of, I want to provide resources to my Spanish speakers, but none exist. So I said, you know what, let me do this. Let me translate every single position paper from the RIA. And I sent it to Nicole. Nicole was like, what is this? I was like, oh, I translated this. I want to make it official for you guys to have. So whenever my students ask for resources or something like that, I can pinpoint them back to you. And they're thankful behind that, because I told them, like, they thought initially, well, maybe there's a monetary compensation. I was like, no, I just want a resource for them. And like, I believe in what you guys are doing. I fell in love with when I started hearing everything and reading through all the stuff that Marty King wrote and the passion behind it. So I said, you know what, I'm in it, and I'm just doing it for that, so I can help the industry.
I'm glad I asked. I didn't know that's how you got the volunteer, what you had done to get the Volunteer of the Year award. That's very interesting. Cliff, let's turn it over to you.
Oh, thanks, Joe. Let's talk a little bit about curriculum. In general, how can the current curriculum in IICRC courses and in the CEC offerings be improved? Have you ever thought about that?
I have, and it's still I guess thinking, how could it work? Because I believe that a curriculum should be, in our industry at least, more application heavy rather than information. Because right now, the way it is, we're just kind of learning the science, and the certain procedures and so on and so forth, but it doesn't translate to what we really see day to day, at least nowadays. So I believe that the student have to understand the message, but under pressure, like what they really are going to go through. So one of the things that I was thinking was it has to be case-based learning. That's what I do. I show my students my real water losses, real moisture maps from other people, to make sure that they see what's going on, what happened, and how it went wrong. That's one of the things that I love to show, the failing point, because they end up seeing where they're also making the mistakes. The other part is the scenario-based practices. I like to do to say to them, what would you do if you do it this way or that way? Instead of memorizing like words, definitions, and so on and so forth. The other thing that I think the industry, to be quite honest, has this issue is a distinction between like whatever the standard of care is or the best practices is versus the common myths, because that's one thing that we haven't, I guess, overcome yet. And that's what I try to tell my students, like, here is what, unfortunately, sometimes it's done as a practice, but it is wrong because this is a better way, and it's because we're trying to protect the health and safety of the structure and the occupants at the same time. The other thing is more hands-on practice, because I guess we do go more on theory rather than practicing with a hand, a scenario, even if it's in an office. I sometimes bring the little balls for the little kids. You know how they sell the little pack of little balls?
Right.
I throw them on the floor and make them like pick up, but like make it a scenario like if it's a water loss without having water. Just to kind of make a point to them, like how long it takes, it's the certain things about documentation and so on and so forth. Because I believe if the student learn something basic, like let's say psychometric, we study it in half of the day. I'm gonna make sure that the other part of the day they're actually practicing, but I will force them, without telling them, I will force them to make failures, because I want to make sure they actually understand what they're gonna go through in the field. And then the other one would be probably for the curriculum to update, how do you say this, disputes that we face today, because I don't think the current curriculum does that. Maybe having documentation examples, how communication failures occur, inspection sequences, especially handling limitations. Because
what do you mean by limitations?
So they always tell us, go ahead and once you have a water, put all the equipment that's necessary and start doing the drawing. But what about on the business side? What if there's no one that is actually going to pay? Let's just say maybe there's no coverage for X reason, and the customer believes there is. Or what if the customer is the one telling you, don't remove this, I want you to dry it, but in reality we have to remove it because it's sewage water. That's where I see that we're going through that as an industry that is not being like mentioned.
So, if you could give me one of the myths that you mentioned.
Right now, one of them, I heard it long ago, and I'm hearing it again, the 3-day, that in 3 days, everything's gonna dry. And sometimes I tell the students, look, women will understand. The women that maybe they use the leggings or fajas, sometimes they use, I forgot the proper word behind that. I tell them, women, are you gonna wash that and dry that on hot temperatures? And they're like, no. And every guy is like looking at me like, but why? I don't understand it. And I'm like, because they understand it better than we do. There's a science behind it. You're gonna ruin let's say the leggings or anything that has like nylon on it. because of the sensitivity and so on and so forth. So that's where I tell them this is why it's not possible in certain situations to dry structures in 3 days, especially when you use your meter, let's say on the surface, and you're just checking drywall. You're forgetting about what's behind the walls.
Very good. Very good. Cliff?
Okay. Let's see. What more? Let's be little bit more specific. And how could we improve course curriculum for someone who, let's say, is a new immigrant, coming into the United States, and they're haven't been here for a long time, and they need a job, and they find themselves working for a company, they find themselves in a training class. What are some specific things that you think could be done to improve their educational experience and better prepare them for working in the field?
So right now, what I see, it's an obstacle that they don't have access to resources or information. There is some educational stuff, but it's very limited. This will make them feel very intimidated before even doing even a class, to be quite honest. I've met a lot of them where they're like, I wish there was something where I could maybe see or read before taking it, because I paid so much money and I have no clue what they talked about. So that's one of the things that I do see that the curriculum could probably better itself. One of them is making sure that we have it in plain, simple language. I understand this. The technician up to what we have in the RA, the CR, is a learning journey. But sometimes I feel like we're putting too much like complex words, technical stuff that makes it impossible to actually want the students to want to learn more and actually learn what they're seeing in classes. So plain language would be one of them, the stuff, especially for the Hispanic people, something that is understandable for them and their native language. The other one will be more visual learning. I'm the same. I have to see something, because if I read it, it comes in, it goes out. I have to see it, either like diagrams, workflows, videos. That's one thing that I found super powerful. Videos. Because it stops making assumptions. You're no longer assuming what they're interpreting. Now they're visually seeing, don't do this, and this is what correct looks like. The other thing would be making sure that we can sort of match real jobs, good scenarios and bad scenarios, both of them, because we need both at the same time. So like I mentioned before, so they can open up more freely. As me as a educator, I want to hear their complaints and where they're messing up, because if I'm teaching the same thing every day, I have no clue if I actually made a progress in them or not. So whenever I allow them or they speak up and they start sharing their own stories, I learned something new. And that's what I like. I learned something like that. I didn't think about that. I didn't even realize this was going on, and so on and so forth. So it shows for us to make it more engaging for the students. The other thing would be showing the why. Right now, we're just showing the
what.
I guess the how. We're just showing the how, not the why.
What to do and how to do it. Yeah, not the why.
Yeah, and that's causing a lot of issues. So most immigrants want a better life. To be honest, they went from a bad situation to come here to a better life, to make sure that they can prosper for them if they're here, or to help their family back home. And they really want to respect where they live. One of the things that I heard this from a friend that I didn't realize. Back then, OSHA would show us videos for the trainings. Either it was cartoons, like a little raggedy dog, or like a pretend. Now, the scenarios that they put, because I've seen it, are real cases. And those real cases, the majority of them are Latinos. The majority of them are Latinos. And it does hurt. Like, it burns inside to not think, but to know that right now, we are the example of what not to do.
That's tough. That's
Well,
tough.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether, well, two things. I'm not sure whether either of you have ever seen these videos that they have on different work sites in third world countries, and how they build this crazy scaffolding and do all these crazy things. So I think that's going to really put the blame, I think, where it needs to go. I think this is people that are just inexperienced, regardless of where they're doing it, or going to make mistakes. And I think that's important to to show people. But yeah.
I do. I show this to my students, and I tell them, look, guys, right now we are the example. This is why this is important to learn and to want to grow. Like, because I can teach you stuff, but I can't force you to want to know more. This is on you, and my courses are meant to make sure that at the very end you come back alive or healthy. Because we want that. So that's something that they're slowly realizing, and that's what they like I said, loyalty comes into play. If as a company we start mentioning that, like, hey, I hired you good and healthy. At the very end, I don't care if you end up leaving somewhere else. I want to make sure that the way you came in is the way you come out. That gives them this understanding, like, you care about what I do, how I do it, and me, and eventually my family as well.
You may not know it, but Radio Joe, and I'm not sure that all the audience does it, but before he got into the environmental side, he was a professional teacher. And one of the things that I learned from him that I think made me a better instructor was in the training materials that we put together, to put in a learning objective, like on every page. Like, at the end of the page, this is what we want that person to know. And then, like, at the end of the chapter, these are all the different things that we want that person to know. And I think it just makes a really big difference, because I think students don't always know how to prioritize the information that they receive, and they're bombarded with it, and a lot of it's coming at them, and there's jokes in there, there's things that we do in order to make the learning experience better, and they don't know whether we're serious or not serious, and so on and so forth. But I think just adding these learning objectives are little light bulbs throughout the training material. And I mean, even on stuff that they're going to find on the exam and so on and so forth, like, how do I review for the exam? I have all these different notes and so on and so forth. I think if certain things are highlighted, not the answer, but you need to study this, you need to know that, these are the general areas that we want you to take away. Because if they're taking away 80% of what they're learning, you want that to be the most important 80%. And I think also a lot of times with these exams, students don't necessarily know what they didn't know. So they go away thinking that they got the questions right on the exam, or they got a 70% or 75, but what did they get right? What did they get wrong? And I think that's why a lot of times mistakes get perpetuated. But it's probably time for halftime. What do you think, Joe?
It's time for the roundup. Let's go to the roundup, Grayson. And the roundup is brought to us by Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com. Let's bring in the restoration industry global watchdog, Pete Consigli. Hello, Pete.
Hey, guys. So, first of all, I want to say, Luis, great job. I have probably taken more notes and more interest on this interview than I have in in the 20 years we've done IIQ Radio. So I started scribbling. Then I actually organized my notes. And Cliff, if you can't keep up with me, I'll pick it up when I review the draft. But I'm going to go through these points quickly and tie into everything that was said. You know, Cliff, Joe, you see he's got that devious little grin and smile on his face because he kind of knows, oh, here comes the consigliere wave. All right, I'm going to start off in chronological order following the show. The first thing was, in the very beginning, we talked about the difference between hands-on training and classroom training and all that. So there's a book, which people who know me, I've talked about this for years. It's called The Stuff Americans Are Made Of. It was published in the late 90s. And you can get it on Amazon sometimes for a penny. It costs more to ship it. But the two authors worked for Disney University, and they did a global study where they compared America to Germany and to Japan. It was a work study on how do people learn and what do they prefer. And at the time, 80% of the corporate companies used lecture-based training. Only 6% of the people felt that was the best way that they learned to train. The two things that were the most desired by people to train was hands-on training and we really get your sleeves dirty. That was about 50%. But the other one was not that they're hands-on, but they watch somebody else do it. And Cliff knows that's a lot of times what happened in these ASD and in the smoke and firehouses. The people don't necessarily get in there and start washing walls, but they want to watch someone else do it. And then that's kind of helpful. Anyway, it's a fabulous book on productivity, and probably even today, the principles hold up. The other thing is Dr. Miner. Now, so in 1997, the WLI under the old ASCR banner, we had a big, huge conference in Pittsburgh. And Dr. Miner is a guy who deals with disinfectants in Texas and test products so that they meet requirements for EPA disinfectant language. And he had one of the best sayings I've ever heard at an ASCR REA event. At the very end, someone said, well, Dr. Miner, can you wrap up your technical scientific presentation? What should the remediators and restorers know? He said, it's very easy. He says, first you clean it, then you dry it, then you apply to a clean, dry surface your EPA disinfectant, and then you send them the bill. Now, that sending them a bill part just cracked up 300 people in the room. But today, if we had the same conversation, for those of you that listened to Dr. Moon's show a couple weeks ago, he'd probably say, clean it, dry it, apply the disinfectant, do the post-verification remediation, and then send them the bill. Now, this thing, I learned a lot from Claude Blackburn, and this ties into what you're saying about, are the guys who got the podium, Cliff and Luis, are they like, the end-all, be-all? No, not even close. As a matter of fact, Marty King used to open every presentation by saying this: not one of the heads knows more than all of the heads. He may have been the smartest guy in the room, but he knew that collectively we knew more than him. I never forgot that. But Claude told me one time when I took over the Dry's back in those days when he, started to build a company, he said, Pete, he said, I just want to let you know, when you got the podium, he says, you have to be very responsible what you say, how you say it. But he said, but let me tell you this, you're going to learn far more from the students than you'll ever teach them. I never forgot that either. He was right. Luis, you brought that up. Learning from our mistakes. This is big. So if I want to know something about somebody, anyone who knows me knows I'm really big into case studies. Case studies is simple. Here was what we had. This is what we did. This is what happened. What can I learn from it? And those are the four things. It's a case study. And what happens is that I'll ask someone, I say, don't tell me about all these great jobs you did. You're supposed to do great jobs. You're professional. You're charging people good money. They expect it. Tell me where you screwed up. If you didn't screw up, you either haven't been doing it long enough or you're lying. So I said, tell me where you screwed up and how'd you fix it? People are willing to share that those are the people I want to hear. And if you screw up in a job and you fix it and respond quickly, that customer will be a customer for life, more so than one that you do a perfect job every time. I found this out with my old buddy Butch Carpenter from my deal. We did a project years ago. It was a drying job up on the top of Nob Hill. It's an affluent area where the Fairmont is. Actually, RA had its 50th, ASCR had its 50th anniversary convention there. We had a client there, it was a high-end property manager for years. Anyway, the short story is we got a call back 2 months after we had dried this brand new hardwood flooring, and they had issues. Well, we screwed up. What we didn't realize, there were multiple layers of wood subflooring on concrete under the wood. And we didn't do the moisture detection then, this is 20 years ago, all the way down to the bottom. The water eventually creeped its way up and it affected it. So Butch said to me, he said, Pete, just go out there and fix it. I don't care what you have to do. And I went out there and I fixed it. I didn't fix it by completely replacing it. I negotiated with the adjuster who was on the claim. I said, well, if we would have done it right in the first place, we wouldn't have been able to dry this floor. We would have had to replace it. So I said, let me write you what that estimate would be. I'll tell you what you spent, and we'll refund that, and we'll give you the difference so you can replace the floor. He goes, I hadn't thought of such a creative solution. So we never wind up paying for the whole thing. We paid for what we thought was the right thing to do. And the adjuster said, that's good. And that was it. We took care of it. Butch said, he said, boy, once in a while we need to get knocked off our high horse because we get a little too cocky because we think we're really, really good. But everybody screws up. If you just haven't been taking risks and you haven't been doing many jobs. Mickey Lee, the late Mickey, he had a terrific style, which Joe, I think it's very similar to what you were talking about with your buddy Danny. You know, I used to do a lot of training with Mickey, both in the commercial sector and with ASCR and RIA. And Mickey had a very unique style. He considered himself a facilitator. He wandered around. He talked to people. He facilitated the will of the group. And every group is a little different. And that's kind of what you're talking about, Luis. What do they need? What do they want? And you got to get them to tell you. You got to get them to trust you. You got to get them to not be embarrassed, right? And he was a great trainer. That's a great attribute to have. So in 2008 and 2009, REA had 2 back-to-back years at our annual convention. And at, this is, of course, under the, actually it was REA. We rebranded in 2007. In 2009, we tried a thing in St. Louis at the fall conference. It was called an unconference. And we hired a company that did this. Anyway, we had 2 back-to-back years with a keynote, two kind of keynote presentations on developing a Latino-friendly workplace. And the information was fabulous. And one of the big things that I got out of that, and Luis, you brought this up, the people who put this on said the more important thing in dealing with developing a Latino-friendly workplace isn't to understand the language and all of that. It's that to understand the culture. The culture is actually more important than the language. And he said, of course, it's good to know some language, and the people that are essentially the Anglos should learn a little bit of the Spanish too. And it's the exchanging of understanding a little bit of the language and understanding the culture, which creates the collaboration and creates the bonds. So I thought that was useful. She also basically, one of them said from Dallas, she's the largest Latino trainer really in the country, doing marketing and stuff. She basically said that the difference between Latino and Hispanic, in order to be called Hispanic, the language of the origin country must be Spanish. So like in South America, the only country that doesn't have Spanish as their first language is Brazil. It's Portuguese. So therefore they're Latino, but they're not considered Hispanic. That's neither here nor there, but that is what it is. America is, she told us this, America is the second largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. Think about that for a minute. We have over 50 million Americans who consider Spanish their first language. At the time when that statistic was out after that census, that represented almost 20% of our population. And only Mexico has more. So every other one of these countries in South America, they got less than 50 million people population. So think about that. It's very useful to know and understand Spanish if you live in America, and particularly if you run a business that has service-related businesses where you have Latino workforce, and I can list a whole slew of them. It's very, very helpful. And one of the keys to you having a Latino workforce, integrated with a Anglo workforce, is you absolutely must have bilingual supervisors. That's the key, and that's the competitive edge more than anything. And now, of course, bilingual trainers. Keep shaking your head, Luis, and I know, because if I do something wrong, no, Pete, you ain't got it right. Just keep shaking. What I will say, Luis, and listening to you, this is point 8, you truly have a servant's heart. That whole deal, where Nicole thought, well, Luis did all this work, is he going to charge me? No. You'll make your money the old-fashioned way. You'll earn it. In other words, if there was a resource, you'll earn it because people will hire you to do professional training. That's what belonging to associations is about. Is you got to give more than you take. Everybody takes a little bit when you come in, but the ones who stick around, then they give back. You know, that's a Teddy Roosevelt quote that Cliff is very fond of, is that every person has an obligation and a duty to give back to the profession from which they derive their livelihood. And you do that through associations primarily. Communication, that's a big one. You guys talked about a lot of these issues have to do with communication. Well, anybody that listened to some of the Closing the Gap and the Donnybrook debates that was under the REA banner back in the day, we had a very well-known person who presented from one of the big insurance companies, and he talked about 11 different things that he felt our industry should pay attention to if we want to have a better relation with the insurance industry. And I'll kind of briefly tell you, 2 of them had to do with contents and packouts and garment. 3, 4 of them had to do with the science, you know, dealing with mostly with water and stuff. And but of the 11, 6 of them all had to do with bad communication. So it wasn't about not knowing how to do the work and all that. He says, we just don't communicate very well. And I think that's what the REA AGA is all about. It's how to build these bridges and tear the walls down that separate. You know, Marty always used to say, he always talked about the fact that the insurance, if it wasn't for the insurance industry, that to a certain degree, there probably wouldn't be a restoration industry. But he said, because they primarily fund the work that restorers do. Now, that's not the only funding. And stuff comes from the government and self-insured and property managers and a number of other things. But we should always be respectful of the fact that they do provide the funding, and we have a mutual need of each other. They present policies, and within those policies, if things can be saved, then they need to be saved, and that's where our industry comes in. So one of our executive directors back in the 90s, she was Colombian, and I remember at an IICRC meeting when this whole thing was brought up in the 90s. Mid-90s, Cliff, you were in the room at the time. This was an IICRC meeting. It was brought up about doing Spanish training. And one of the things that she said, we have to be careful because there's a lot of different dialects that deal in all these different countries. And that was brought up on the show. So she just did that was an advisory. But there are Latino instructors who are doing IICRC approved training in Spanish. But you know, when I listen to her say that, I go, but that's true in America. That's true in English. You know, that's true in English. That's true. The difference between an Australian slang, British slang. If you live in America, you live in New York City, you live in California, you live in Alabama, where you live in Chicago. We all have different slang and different way we talk. Sometimes you need somebody to translate that. You know, that's just kind of part of the part of it. So that applies everywhere. That should not be an impediment to us doing that kind of thing. The other thing that's really big, Cliff, and this is a big thing, this ties into what Cliff said, we should have a provision to have oral exams. You know, Luis talked about this. We have a lot of people who are either dyslexic, they have language issues, but they're unbelievable technicians. They know how to do that job. They can run circles around anybody that can pass the test and all that, right? So we should have a provision to do oral exams. I know it's a real big ask, but at some particular point, we just want to know that somebody's competent. And the competence shouldn't necessarily have to be just because they knew how to take an exam. Not everybody knows to take an exam. And people who know how to take an exam, they probably couldn't, you know, I better not say that. I want to behave myself. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Now, the other thing is when you start talking about that the cartoons and the OSHA thing, you know, one of the things that a lot of people don't know me, I did a lot of Stephen Covey training back in the day before they merged with the Franklin people. And I was licensed to do 5 different programs that dealt with team building and leadership training. And 3 of them were real life case studies done somewhere in the world with a message to help build a team and to develop leaders. But 2 of them, they did like not cartoons, but they did stage scenarios to make a point, and they usually were humorous. So the whole idea of using, I mean, that's how children learn with the Muppets and things of that nature, right? It's visual. Matter of fact, years ago, I was at a thing, the guy who developed the most successful ad campaign of all time was, I think it was in the 70s. And here it is. And there's a bunch of people who will remember this. They took a picture. They said, "This is your brain." and they showed the brain. It was an egg. They cracked the egg and they put it in a hot grill and it was fried. And they go, "That's your brain on drugs." You didn't need an explanation or anything with that. And that advertising and marketing is called the visual thing, where you see something, you need very few words and very few things to remember those visual things for a long time. On the New Jersey Turnpike, when you come out of New York, all right, driving down early in the upper part of Jersey, long before you ever get down to Philly and get down to crossing over the Delaware Memorial Bridge, there's this big, huge billboard. And I don't know if it's still there. It was a public service billboard. And what it said was, it showed an arm and it showed a needle in the arm. The message had nothing to do with drugs. They said, smoking is bad for you. They were equating through that. And when you're driving down the highway, that smoking's not good. It's like putting a needle in your arm, and the needle was the form of a cigarette. So anyway, just think about that kind of stuff. So finally, what I kind of want to say is, and this kind of ties into some of the stuff that Cliff talked about, guys, we should get 100 on our exams, but we can't. So we never know the 20, 30, 5%, whatever the percent is to pass. We don't know what we got wrong. So how do you feel about the guy who's building an airplane, who's qualified to build an airplane, and he doesn't know the 20% he got wrong, or any profession like that, So it's kind of a real stretch your area there, but I don't know. Those are things that should actually. My partner John T. Hull in the roofing industry, he has a certification course for commercial roofing, and what he does is he still uses paper and books because it's small classes. He's very digitally competent, but he does that. And what he does is after 2 days, which is a combination of lecture training and hands-on training, showing him how to do all this, he then gives an exam. He sits there. They fill out the exam. He grades the exam right there with the students in the room and he tells them they passed. Then he reviews the entire exam. He tells them what the right answer is. Cliff, that's kind of what you're talking about, aren't you? Mm-hmm. Right? Is that he then told everyone. So I think he said just about everybody passes the exam, but they get stuff wrong. So he wants them to know before they leave what they got wrong and why, and he explains it. That's a great teaching style. Luis, I have two final things to say here, and actually one. It has to do with what you said about you want them to go home healthy. I learned this lesson in the late 70s, around the time when I met guys like Lee Pemberton and people like this, Ed York, all of them. And at the time, I was working for a company in Stamford, Connecticut. And the founder of that company was one of the 10 founding members of RAA, Mr. Schaefer. He actually was our president in 46 and 47 for 2 years. I actually worked for the man. And they had the big implant cleaning operation, kind of like Woodard's and companies like that. The 10 founding members of our association all had that. Then they had what they called the on-location people that went out and did all the different methods of carpet and upholstery cleaning. And some of the member companies sold floor coverings and draperies and did drapery cleaning and that. But essentially, that was the roots of the early part of our industry. And they would do a little bit of water damage, but most of the stuff, they would dry the carpets in the plant. And sometimes it went back in, sometimes it didn't. Because back in those days, there was no replacement cost. It was actual cash value. So people, they try to save it because they may not have enough money after their settlement to actually replace the carpet. But I remember there were two guys there who were about 50. One was an Italian boy and one was an Irishman. They've been working together for years. These guys were the epitome of what professional carpet and upholstery cleaners were. They're unbelievable. And they knew the 4 or 5 different methods of carpet cleaning, and they knew the 2-3 different best methods for upholstery cleaning. And quite frankly, anybody that worked for Woodard's in those days or any of those companies, they had guys like this. This is what I remember is they had respiratory issues, they had throat issues, they had skin things. And in my mind, what I realized, it all lended to the fact that there just wasn't good training that dealt with all the OSHA laws, the chemical, the health, and the safety. And these guys who were around 45 to 50, they looked like they were 70. All right. Now, when I kind of became my own boss and then started to train other people, what I realized, I made a commitment, and this is what Luis said. I learned this many years ago. When I was a carpet cleaner, I had a very well-known friend of mine in Cliffs, who Hydromaster named an award after him. He lived in Brooklyn. He gave me this little small bottle that was in a brown glass bottle. Brown glass bottle, Joe, right? You know that kind of stuff? It doesn't have a label that said it's carcinogenic on it. It was pure butyl-cellulose. And he said, if you pour this product into the cleaning solution on the truck mount, when you get these really tough, greasy jobs like in restaurants, it says it'll clean like heck. It did clean like heck, but about almost fell over. And I learned later that that product eventually kind of got banned in a lot of things because it was carcinogenic. I didn't know what that meant in the day. I had to find a dictionary to look it up because you couldn't Google it. And I never used those products again, and I was careful. And I guess to wrap it up, my main point is this. I decided, as either being a business owner, a manager, an employer, a supervisor, that I was going to take seriously and keep it in proper perspective that people were safe. If you look at every standard, it always talks about safety. That's how everything starts, right? Job site should be safe, etc. About the workers. I think people can be over dramatic, and I think they could be too cavalier. I think you need to find it. We need to follow the law, because you know why? I never wanted to be the one to have to tell the wife or the family of some employee because I either didn't do it or I was bullied by the owner I worked for because they didn't want to do it because one of their clients said, well, we'd rather that they're not looking like the Pillsbury Doughboys or whatever when the law allowed it. I didn't want to have to be the one to tell them that their husband, their spouse, whatever, was sick, got cancer, was in the hospital because something happened because we did not enforce some kind of a rule. And the industry is lax in that for a long time. I think we're better today, but I also think we have too many extremists. And then we have a lot of related industries we work with where they, quite frankly, they just don't think it's necessary. And neither one of those approaches work. You have to be more logical, common sense, and centrist. And the biggest thing, Luis, that I found about you, you have common sense. Everything that you talked about, you said, just makes common sense. And oftentimes our associations, the institutes, all of them, they don't know how to deal with it, and they get too hung up sometimes. And I don't mean this as a criticism. It's just maybe the fact, and maybe that's the way it is, with the policy, the procedures, and the bureaucracy of it. And I get it. When you have to manage hundreds and thousands of people, it's difficult to do some of the stuff. But we should always be pushing the envelope to be better, to be safe, and to provide healthy environments to the buildings that we restore, and our employees go home safe at the end of the day. And Luis, that's a great message. And thank you very much for sharing. And I wish you the best. And you'll have guys like me and Cliff. We'll help you wherever we can. We'll help you wherever we can.
Thank you, Pete.
Joe.
Much appreciated, Pete. Always great to have you join us. Luis, before we go, we always like to give you the final thought. Now, if you would, as a part of your final thought, I wanted to ask you about your use of AI. It sounds to me like you're using AI quite a bit, and it's been very helpful in your new business and your life. Can you tell our audience a little bit about how you do that?
So I use for starters, I use two programs, Google Notebook LM and ChatGPT. I forgot, I think that's what it's called. But I use it for two separate things. If it has to do with reviewing something because my time is super short, I use Google Notebook LM because it'll give me like a 5-sentence or 6-sentence summary of what it is, and it will find me, like, direct me super quick to something that I'm looking for a job or for education, either or. The other one, it helps me to make sure that I could, instead of spending hours, because I did this. I remember I helped Restoration Science Academy to translate the fire course into Spanish. Oh man, that took me a couple of weeks to do. But if I didn't realize that there was AI can shorten it out. However, I have to be cautious because it could make it sound like perfect, but the translation, the meaning, and all that stuff might be thrown off completely. So I still use it to kind of reduce my time cycle. However, I still have to read every single thing to make sure that it makes sense. So you would need someone who understands Spanish to make sure that he tells you yes or no. that's pretty much how I use it to make sure that it could cut my time. The other one, if I have to research something quick that's long, like even videos, Google Notebook LM, you can put a YouTube video, and I guess it will read the transcript and give you a summary, and like you'll go through certain information process quicker when the time is super short.
Okay. And is there anything else you'd like to add before we call it a day?
I guess two things to make it simple. One of them is you can use numbers, pictures, and colors. It don't matter what language you speak.
Not
people will
numbers,
understand it.
pictures, or
Pictures,
what was the, or
colors.
Okay.
colors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had an employee that did not know how to read at all and only spoke Spanish. And he became my greatest upholstery cleaner. And he knew exactly what chemicals to use, what to test, how to do it, because I did it in a little sequence using pictures and colors. So that's one way to, if you have to kind of communicate in the field, I guess, having a little system, a way that you guys can apply it. If it has to do with, I don't know, PPE, put a picture of PPE. So that's one, numbers, pictures, and colors that to make a little cheat sheet, you could say. And then the other thing, the last thing I guess would be, if we're not protecting people, we're missing the point. That's the way I see it. If we're not protecting the people, we are really missing the point of what we're doing. We have to teach from actually real mistakes that we've been through, not hide them. I know sometimes it's really hard to say because I don't know, maybe we went through the status or people see us as the perfect example, but we should not hide them, and we should focus on truly what things, how people actually change. So if we want to make sure that we change the industry, I guess we have to change how people really work. And I'm not against nor for SOPs, but sometimes we overdo it. And the last very little thing is, since I can testify because I went through my personal experience, speed, obedience, and clean KPIs don't always mean it was done right.
Very good.
Okay,
All right.
say it one more time. Go ahead.
Oh, speed, obedience, and clean KPIs don't always mean it was done right.
Okay.
Very good. Luis Suarez, thank you for joining us today. It was a very interesting afternoon, and we appreciate it and hope to see you again soon. I also want to say thanks to my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick, the restoration industry's global watchdog, Pete Consigli, our engineer at the controls, Grayson, Gone Fishing Fisher. Most importantly, our sponsors and our loyal audience. Next Friday, we've got Dr. Eugenia Mirica from EMSL. We're going to talk about fire and, different analytical methods used for testing soot and fire and soot and I don't know what all it's called there, Cliff. What do we got? Char, soot,
Good char, ash.
Ash. All right, that's the words. And we'll be back next Friday at noon with the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.